Good afternoon, everyone. As was expected, early snows, cold as we progress deeper into the Eddy Grand Solar Minimum. An enormous amount of headlines now coming out talking about cooling. If you've seen the headlines, everywhere is blaring Grand Solar Minimum, mini ice age. Just in time for the storm, blizzard warning out for New York City. Iconic scenes of heavy snowfall that you would expect somewhere around January or February. So many instances of record breaks going on. I'm just trying to compile it into one slide. New York City, century mark broken. San Antonio, Texas, century mark broken. 27 states with winter storms. Look at the crosshairs. Ice, snow, sleet. Nightmare commute is kind of an understatement. 1,900 flights delayed. So what do you think is going to happen to all the crops that are being harvested right now? And North America is not the only place receiving heavy snowfalls. Greece, 5 feet. 41 degrees Fahrenheit below zero in Russia. Yet all the experts that told us don't worry about this are now having to step back. The doomsday climate models are flunking the math test. And when NASA comes out and says, hey, our atmosphere is losing heat and we're going to get really cold on our planet when we go from this type of a sun into a cooler state. After all, we're just one small planet in this large galaxy. There's other factors at work, electromagnetism, the electric universe. And this will be a crystal ball into the future of what you can expect moving through the next 12 years, your economy, your life, society. And during these uncertain times, I've teamed up with Patriot Supply long-term food storage, a nice, affordable starter kit, 2-week food supply, 1,500 calories per day, breakfast, lunch, and dinners, plus the 4-gallon storage containers included in that. This is a good first step in getting more self-sufficient. And if you click through the Prepare with Adapt 2030 page in Patriot Supply, you can get this starter kit for $75. Please remember there's a limit of 2 per household in this special offer. We begin with blizzard warnings in effect for New York City. Now this is all across the news, plastered from DC to New York. I wanted to show you a few images that were of interest from myself. Iconic bridges, deep snows, and I thought, well, that's a lot of snow for this time of the year. And lo and behold, New York City shattering the 112-year-old snowfall record. And I thought, yes, that would be possible, but how much did they break the record by? Well, the old record, as you can see, was 1 inch. November 15th, 1906. This snowfall is 6.4 inches, meaning that the old record was broke by 6 times the previous amount and dropped. Looking at around 400,000 customers without power due to this winter storm, and these totals are going to continue to increase as the tail end of this whips through and then drops the ice. Snow damage and ice damage, they're quite different, especially with the heavy limbs. Now the cancellation of the flights originally was around 350 flights. That's up to 1,900 flights, and they're predicting more. They're predicting around probably a peak total of 2,300 flights to be either canceled or delayed around the entire United States and Canada. Now when we look at Winter Storm Avery, some of these shots coming out of New York City, not only is it what you would expect, a couple months from now, deeper into the winter, please realize we're not even in winter yet. Winter does not officially start until December 21st. So to have 27 states in the United States under a winter storm warning, as well as the east coast of Canada further up, that's a separate cyclonic system up there, hurricane force winds and a winter storm all through Labrador and the Maritimes of Canada. They dropped the ball. New York City was not prepared for this event at all. They underrated the potential and the power of it, and you can see the effects. Well, BBC picked up the story talking about the U.S. having these incredible storms and snowfalls. They pretty much focused on New York City and D.C., obviously. Nightmare commute. Well, this is how much snow's come down. And again, they dropped the ball. They didn't have snow plows out. They weren't salting the roads, and it was a nightmare disaster. You should see some of the images of the subway and underground station. It was a full-on lockdown in the city. Crosshairs is pretty much where the heaviest precipitation events in terms of freezing rain. But then you have to look down at Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. That had hard freeze. All-time record cold records broken down there as well. We're talking about Texas and Arizona, all-time record cold. Now this is just continuing from last week as well. It's been like this for the second time. This is the 2.0 super freeze way before winter. And the headline here, New York commuters ask why the city wasn't prepared for this winter storm. I would say the exact same thing. I don't know why they didn't heed the warnings. When they were looking at the weather maps and you saw these 25 degrees to 30 degrees Fahrenheit below normal temperatures coming with this system, images here, streets that are not plowed or cleared, you might still be able to drive down there if you have the correct tires on at this time of the year, but most people haven't converted over because they're not used to getting this much snow even until January. So snow, winter storm blanketing the Northeast, up to a foot. Now, what you see in Ohio and Indiana, Michigan, they had freezing rain into the inches, where streets were covered with 2 inches of solid ice. Another year, trees down, power lines down. Now, taking a look over in Pennsylvania, the snow totals were substantially more, but the difference is you see those roads, they had the snow plows out. This is a wisp, a taste of what's to come. Now, you have to realize this is really another year before the official, what would be considered onset of the grand solar minimum. So the conditions you're seeing now are going to amplify and amplify and amplify. The northern hemisphere is going to become colder during the winter, so you're going to start to see these, just edge of season types of events that are pushed back a month, 2 months into the seasonality of it. This is the middle of a January winter storm here that's occurring in the middle of November. And also as we taper out into spring, you're going to start to see these types of events Easter or even after. It's going to affect planting and harvesting times. The crops are going to be affected. That's one of the things that are always talked about during these grand solar minimums. Traffic chaos, when your infrastructure breaks down, literally this is the result. Even just simple snow plowing would have taken care of this. Just a simple salt drop on the road also would have taken care of this. IceAgeNow.info, Robert Felix's site. There's so much going on. Literally by the minute there's a new record break coming in. It's really hard to keep up at the moment. I just went with the biggies, if you will, for the slide here. New York City shattering the 112-year-old snow record. We looked at that. Snow down to the Mexican border. But you know what's interesting? The Weather Channel and others are being very silent about the all-time record snows in Arizona all the way down into Mexico at this time of the year. Extremely rare. Mexican media is picking it up. San Antonio, again, 102-year record freeze. The old record there was 28 degrees Fahrenheit, and the new record is 23 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's 5 degrees Fahrenheit, literally 20% cooler on that record break. This one will come out of the National Weather Service, Austin, Texas. 1916 is the last time this cold of temperatures broke the record. And here we go again, it's 5 degrees break on that. So we're going back to the centennial minimum, and we're going to crush right through that as we get into lower solar activity. A reminder of the day before yesterday and what the temperature gradient map looked like. In that purple, it's 25 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit below normal temperatures, but on the outside, it's maybe 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. So when these two air masses are colliding together, the ferocity and the intensity is going to be much more than we're used to. You have to realize this is our new weather patterns. This is what the jet streams are forming as our magnetosphere is weakening. So as we transition into the grand solar minimum, all the weather is going to be extreme like this. And it's going to get colder and hotter on the sides of these as we progress through. So when you're getting in that middle transition line, it's going to become even more intense. Now think about this. They talked about in the 1600s in the Maunder minimum, hailstones that were 5 to 7 pounds each, blowing through at 60 miles an hour through some of these weather fronts. That's what we can expect as we get into 2020, 2023, 2025. You know, the weather's one thing. We can heat our homes, we can wear more clothes. It's all about the crops. Without the food, our planet doesn't exist in the way it does right now. Our societies fall apart. Civilization untangles itself at the threads of the weave, if you will. We need food. So let's take a look with what these winter storms in the early part of November are doing to the harvesting across the border from Canada and the United States as well. Alberta, They lost half their crops due to cold anyway this year. And you saw the enormous amount of reduction in wheat and protein content and the actual quality of the wheat. Because it's not every day that you see combines harvesting through the snow just to get it out of the ground, because if they don't get it, it's just going to be lost. So it's better to get something versus nothing. And that would be following on the heels of this heavy snow weather warning, again, just a couple days ago. I really can't believe that this is New York. Now, it doesn't snow that much there in the winter anyway. It's not a place known for incredible snows. Boston last year, places off of Lake Erie, you know, they're more well known for the South Bend, Indiana. I mean, huge amounts of lake effect snow. But this already, they haven't had this much snow normally in the record until at least the middle or the end of December. And we're a month and a half early on what even considered heavy December snows. Now, if it was happening in the United States and Canada, parts of Mexico, you would expect it also to happen in other places across the planet, especially in the Northern Hemisphere. Russia, 41 degrees below zero. That's incredible at this time of the year as well. You just don't get these types of temperatures normally in November. Middle of January, February, for sure, almost every day. But not 2 months early. Russian media is picking it up, saying how incredibly rare it is, and they're also baffled how cold it's been twice. It's been like this for an entire week. The temperatures dropped to 35 degrees below zero. Eastern Europe, taking a look over at Bosnia, Herzegovina, I got Croatia, Greece over there. But I want to zoom in on Greece specifically, because when I say Greece, you just don't get the idea or the perception in your mind of exceptional snowfalls. You know, Swiss Alps, yeah, heavy snow. French Alps, heavy snow. Southern Greece, 5 feet of snow. Now, for those of you in the States, please remember the equivalent is 30 centimeters approximately for a foot. So when they're looking at 150 centimeters to drop, that's 5 feet. And in the periphery areas there as well, it's 3 feet, 4 feet, 2.5, 3 feet, somewhere in there. Now, the whole point of this video is to try to explain that solar activity is driving all these changes. What you're seeing right now, that's the case study, if you will. We're going to take a look at the solar activity here, and our sun is set to decrease its solar output. So I want you to look at the bottom chart, and we also look at the top graphic of what the sun looks like. So when I say decrease in its activity state, it's going to go from high activity like you see on the left with a lot of sunspots, right over onto the right where the decrease in activity, a blank disk, and reduced output. UV changes, if the sun's biting your skin and you're feeling it, that's an indicator as well. But I want to draw your attention to the bottom with the solar activity. Now that red arrow shows where we're going over solar cycle 25. Now you got to realize that solar activity is going to be really much lower than it was this cycle. But the interesting thing, if you look at the last blue solar cycle where we are now, we've come back off and we're in the solar minimum, the 11-year regular solar minimum. If you go back through history, you need to go back and try to find something with the equivalent amount of energy, and we come all the way back to the 1880s. So when we start to see these records broken in 1916, 1884, 1886, 1905, this fits right in the same time frame of lower solar activity, and we're just going back into that. But the number one thing you need to consider moving forward is the amount of solar activity expected has not been experienced since 1640. We're going to go to almost no sunspots for a full 1 to 2 solar cycles, which is at least a decade, possibly 2. Now, what does this mean for you and I? That means that our crops are going to have a very difficult time growing. What you're experiencing now, these storms are nothing. I mean, really nothing in comparison to what's on tap, what we're going to experience as we move forward. Respond. The sun is electromagnetically connected to our Earth. So if the sun goes into a decreased activity state, our Earth is going to respond magnetically. The magnetosphere is going to weaken. But you also have to realize that we're in such a large galaxy that our planet is just one little tiny planet in a little solar system swinging around the arms of this galaxy. There's so many other factors at play here in terms of electromagnetism, waves, repeating cycles as we transit through space. There's so many things that we don't even know about the center of our galaxy. pulse waves, electrical waves coming out of that affect not just our planet and our solar system and our star, but every star throughout our galaxy. And these cycles have been mapped out over 200 million years. So they know when we start and we circle around the galaxy once, it's a 200 million year round trip. Now during that time, there's all of the other cycles that are in play there. We're just mapping out a smaller duration of time. I'm going to bring you over here. Something's happening to the sun right now, and here's what it means for Earth. Now, if you haven't noticed, over this last 2 weeks since Valentina Zarkova has given her talk on forecasting out the grand solar minimum, there's been an enormous amount of news media coming out talking about grand solar minimum, mini ice age, cooling on the planet, transition into a cooler climate, atmosphere is changing, all these things right now. Now it's a tidal wave of these types of articles coming out. So I want to delve into one to show you exactly what it means and what they're trying to tell you by not telling you all 100% of the information. So our atmosphere is losing heat energy. This comes from Dr. Tony Phillips, citing some experts from NASA. Even the NASA Langley Research Center is talking about a cooling planet. Atmosphere is losing heat energy. They're talking about the trend continuing and going into global cooling. So what does that mean? They're talking about the thermosphere far up in the atmosphere cooling. Now I want to bring up this chart here. Now, these blue boxes are exactly the same size. And I line them up with the bottom of the solar cycle and the intensity. When we get down to the 11-year solar minimum where we are now, what do you notice in the difference of these? Length of the solar cycle and also solar activity during this solar cycle 24. The current solar cycle we're in has ended much faster. The entire cycle fits within that box. But when you look back at solar cycle 20, which was the 1970s, we expect some cooling on the very minimum to be like the 70s. That solar cycle was much longer than this. As well as the activity was higher in the 1970s in solar cycle 20, even though there was massive cooling across the planet. All the snowstorms, almost all records broken that we're breaking today would eclipse something in the 1970s. And if that didn't break, it was back into the early 1900s, 1880s. But that's officially when we started keeping records, so that's as far back as it goes. And NASA comes out clean as well and talks about when sunspots decrease, atmospheric radiation actually increases. And here's where they don't give you the full picture. Now this is cosmic radiation, galactic cosmic rays. I'm going to widen this out. These are measurements from the United States. Now some places are increasing faster than others, as you can see here. But there's a direct correlation or a direct connection between how many of these galactic cosmic rays there are and how much cloud cover this forms on our planet. So now you're starting to add the causation together where you're starting to see these really heavy snowfalls, really heavy flooding, extreme weather events, and we have more clouds in the atmosphere. Now, the amount of galactic cosmic rays is supposed to increase another 30% as we move through this next 2 solar cycles. Now, another tidbit that they've left out of there is where we are now is the highest since they've ever started recording galactic cosmic rays. And we are set to add another 30% on top of that. So what they would have to really do on this chart is completely erase all the yellow where the sunspot cycles are at the top and then make that basically the top line for where we're going to. That's climate chaos unfolding in front of you. This much of an increase in galactic cosmic rays, this much of an increase in cloud cover, albedo effect, there's going to be more sunlight bouncing off the cloud tops, as well as different layers in the atmosphere mixing differently. Our jet streams are moving anyway because the magnetic I've told you is weakening due to the sun's output declining. We're getting all these things happening at the same time. Some are amplifying, and some are just trying to find new places in their cloud bands or jet streams as they flow around the planet. And that's all great and fine and dandy, but a picture's worth 1,000 words. So everything I've told you prior, I want you to take a look into this. Now where it says 2020 in solar cycle 25 toward the right, that top level of activity is only a guesstimate as to how high and how many sunspots we will experience in this next solar cycle. They're already predicting it to be incredibly short. As you can see, the duration of this thing is going to be far shorter than anything, even this solar cycle. Because the ultimate realization and conclusion to come at is, by 2028, we're not going to have it on the planet for everybody to eat. When we go back to what I see in 2028, 29, 2027, forward, we're going back into the 1640s and 1650s in terms of temperature, and we already know what happened then. A history book is your crystal ball. I present to you a crystal ball of paper. Go ahead and check it out. Maunder minimum, M-A-U-N-D-E-R, minimum 1640 to approximately 1710. Playbook, we're seeing it unfold just like it did then. It's not really rocket science to figure it out. It's just going back in time and mapping it. But then all the experts out there are going to say, no, it's not going to happen. The global warming is going to override the global cooling, and this little trace gas on the planet is going to override the sun. Yep. That's what they say. These are the experts. We should believe them, right? They've been so correct about everything. Ocean levels have just risen so far that we needed to abandon the coasts already. Did we not? No, we didn't, did we? These are the same experts telling us they would guarantee that this cooling will have no effect because global warming is going to outstrip the cooling. Well, their forecasts are for 100 years in the future at, now they've downgraded it to 1.5 C, like 1.5 degrees Celsius, 100 years in the future. This is happening in the next 10 years, even faster. The effects are already here, we're being felt. The real cold, the real intensity is going to come by 2023, moving into 2028. This is a reset button for our societies, and they're guaranteeing us this cooling. I wish we'd pump more CO2. We need it. If it truly causes warming, we should do as much CO2 pumping into the atmosphere right now to try to save our planet and save ourselves. Because global cooling, it is a game changer. Read a history book, you'll see what I'm talking about. Case in point, global warming, another doomsday climate model flunk test. They came out with this brand new report, 10 of the best scientists connected with the IPCC and all these groups connected with the environment that have all these models that are running and the best of the best. They claim that the oceans had retained 60% more warming than previously thought. And then several people with some simple math calculations came out and said, wait a second, that is a critical math error. And their findings have been invalidated. Now, the thing is, they were caught on this one. How many of them have they not found of critical errors? Even here, and then once they were caught, and they were trying to deny it in the beginning, because once the first few people did the math and found the same conclusion, others just followed and said, hey, you're right, this is not correct in any way, shape, or form. Climate skeptic uncovers scientific error. I'm sorry, skeptic? See, they're trying to use these trigger words in here. This is a person who said, hey, I think there's a problem with your math. And suddenly they're labeled a skeptic because they found a problem in the mathematics. You see where the narrative's going with this. And Ralph Keeling, a climatologist at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. We keep hearing Scripps again and again and again as the experts on the planet telling us this, that, and the other all the time, and we should believe them beyond reproach. And here they are with a glaring error. The error was so large on the margins that they can't even weigh in on the precise amount of warming that's going on in the oceans any longer. Really? And now anybody who criticizes their papers is considered a skeptic? Now notice the lexicon, because the BBC just last month came out and said, don't give any skeptics even one letter of press inside any publication. And then this was sent far and wide through the AP, and all the news agencies picked it up and parroted it. Do not give one sentence, one word, or one letter in your publications to skeptics. So now these people finding glaring math errors need to go to social media, and once there's enough people behind it to say you really made an error, then they come out and say, oh, we did, but you're a skeptic. I can't believe you'd even ask us because we're beyond reproach. I think that's the reason the news headlines are coming out now talking about global cooling, mini ice age, because everybody's trying to cover themselves. In less than a year, you're really going to see a lot of changes. In 2 years, everything you know about global warming will have changed, and they'll try to bring all these excuses in. Oh, we forgot this thing in the model run, or XYZ factors to explain it away. Plus, when you take a look at the Atlantic Ocean right now, the Atlantic Multidecadal Oscillation, going into its 60-year cool phase right now. So now we have the cooling of the oceans, the grand solar minimum, low solar activity, and somehow it's all still CO2 causing all the changes. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. If you like this type of commentary and discussion, mini Ice Age Conversations tri-weekly podcast available anywhere on the net that you can find a podcast.